It started with a conversation I hadn't expected. A casual evening, wine glasses half full, the flickering glow of the candles casting warm shadows across the living room. The scent of red wine mixed with the faint trace of cologne lingering in the air, wrapping around us like an invisible force. My husband leaned back against the couch, his gaze lingering on me with something unreadable. Something different. "You know," he said, swirling the dark liquid in his glass, watching it move like he was lost in thought. "I think I'd like to see it." I tilted my head, arching a brow, the warmth of the wine buzzing in my veins. "See what?" His lips curled slightly, not quite a smirk, but something close. Something knowing. "You. With someone else." The words settled between us, heavy, shifting the air in an instant. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass, my heart hammering a little too hard against my ribs. I swallowed, but the dryness in my throat remained. "You're joking." His gaze didn't waver. "I'm not." A slow heat crawled up my neck, spreading across my chest. His tone, the look in his eyes, none of this felt like a game. None of it felt like teasing. My husband, the man I had spent years with, was watching me now with something I couldn't quite name, something that made my stomach tighten. "And who, exactly, did you have in mind?" I asked, keeping my voice even, despite the way my pulse quickened. He didn't answer immediately. He just took another slow sip of his wine, his tongue flicking over his bottom lip as he considered. There was something about the way he was drawing this moment out, making me wait, making me wonder. And then, just when I thought he wasn't going to say it, he did. "Michael." The name settled between us, heavier than it should have been. Michael. His best friend. A slow exhale left my lips as my mind raced. Of all the people, Michael had always been around. Holidays, dinners, birthdays. He had seen me at my best and worst, had laughed at my jokes, had poured me drinks, had always been just close enough to notice the way his eyes lingered when he thought no one else was watching. The realization struck me harder than I wanted to admit. I had noticed him too. I glanced back at my husband, searching his face, waiting for a sign that this was all just some kind of test, a game he wanted to play with my reaction. But there was no hesitation in his expression. Only certainty. "And what makes you think he'd be interested?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. A quiet chuckle escaped him, low and knowing. "Trust me, he is." The words sent a slow ripple of something through me. I should have pushed this away, laughed it off, made a joke about how absurd the idea was. But I didn't. Because deep down, in the part of me I rarely acknowledged, I already knew he was right. Michael was interested. And now, so was I. The next time Michael came over, everything felt different. The moment I opened the door, the shift was undeniable. His gaze flickered over me, lingering just a second too long, his throat bobbing as he swallowed. His usual easy smile felt a little tighter, the tension in his shoulders giving him away. My husband sat back in his chair, watching, waiting. He was waiting. We all were. "Glad you could make it," my husband said, his voice smooth, even, like this was just another night, just another visit. He poured Michael a drink, passing it to him without breaking eye contact with me. Michael accepted the glass, but his gaze drifted back to me, dark, curious. "Wouldn't miss it," he murmured. I took a slow breath, my fingers trailing idly along the rim of my own glass, my skin already buzzing with something I wasn't sure I was ready to name. Because for the first time, I wasn't just playing along. I wanted to see where this would go. The air in the room felt heavier than before, weighted with an unspoken understanding. Michael shifted slightly in his seat, fingers curling around the glass in his hand, his knuckles tense against the smooth surface. My husband leaned back, exuding an unsettling calm, his eyes flickering between us like he was enjoying a game only he knew the rules to. I took a sip of my wine, feeling the warmth of it spread down my throat, pooling low in my stomach. But it wasn't just the wine making me warm. It was the way Michael watched me now, different than before, unguarded, as if permission had been granted and he no longer had to pretend he hadn't been looking all along. "You seem nervous," my husband murmured, amusement lacing his voice as he traced the rim of his glass with his fingertip. "Michael, are you nervous?" Michael exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly, but his eyes never left mine. Not nervous. Just making sure this is what she wants. I swallowed, heat curling through me. There was something about the way he said it, something about the way my husband just smiled knowingly, like he already knew the answer. "Oh, she wants it," my husband said smoothly, leaning forward just slightly. "Don't you?" I could have denied it. Could have played coy, pretended this wasn't something I'd already decided the moment the idea had been planted in my mind. But we were past that now, past the point of denial. Instead, I set my glass down on the table and met Michael's gaze head-on. Yes! One word, and the atmosphere in the room shifted completely. Michael's jaw tightened, his grip on his glass flexing before he set it down beside mine. He didn't move right away. Neither did I. But we both felt it, that invisible force pulling us towards something inevitable. "Then don't make her wait," my husband murmured, sitting back, relaxed, watching. Michael hesitated for only a second longer before he stood, slow, deliberate. His presence was overwhelming now, towering, radiating heat and hesitation all at once. He was still waiting for me to change my mind, waiting for me to stop this before it went too far. But I wasn't going to. I lifted my chin slightly, watching him, waiting, daring him. And finally, he moved. The moment his fingers brushed against my skin, my breath caught, a slow ripple of something unknown spreading through me. His touch was tentative at first, like he was testing the waters, like he needed to be sure. I let my fingers skim over his forearm in silent reassurance. My husband's voice cut through the haze. "That's it." Michael's fingers tightened slightly against my skin, and I could feel the restraint in him, the tension coiling beneath the surface. He was holding back. For me. For my husband. For the situation that had suddenly turned into something uncharted, something that none of us could take back now. And I didn't want to. My breathing was shallow, my body humming with anticipation as I tilted my head, watching Michael struggle between hesitation and desire. "Are you still nervous?" I whispered. His lips parted, his jaw flexing as he exhaled. "Not anymore." A quiet chuckle came from the other side of the room, but I barely heard it. Because in that moment, nothing else existed but this. But the decision we had all already made. Michael's fingers brushed over my wrist again, slower this time, more deliberate. A quiet current of electricity passed between us, the weight of unspoken thoughts pressing into my skin. I let out a slow breath, my heart pounding as I leaned ever so slightly toward him, closing the space that had been lingering between us for too long. "You're overthinking it," I murmured, watching his throat bob as he swallowed. "I thought you said you weren't nervous." His lips twitched, his fingers tracing a slow path along my arm. "I never said that. You implied it." His gaze darkened, his fingers stilling. "And you implied that you want this." I inhaled sharply, the air suddenly feeling too thick, too warm. I could feel my husband's presence in the room, could sense him watching, waiting. But my focus remained locked on Michael, on the way his breathing had changed, the way his posture had shifted, tense with anticipation. "Maybe," I murmured. His smirk returned, slow and knowing. "Maybe isn't a yes." I tilted my head, holding his gaze. "It's not a no either." The muscles in his jaw flexed, and I knew then that whatever hesitation he had was slipping, unraveling in real time. The air between us tightened, and for a moment, it felt as if everything outside this moment had ceased to exist. The night stretched long, shadows flickering against the walls, the weight of inevitability settling into my bones. Then, finally, Michael exhaled, his fingers moving again, tracing a slow, lazy path along the inside of my wrist. "You really don't like making things easy, do you?" I smiled, slow and deliberate. "What's the fun in that?" A soft, amused sound came from the other side of the room. My husband, ever patient, watching from his seat, swirling the last of his drink, eyes glinting with something unreadable. "Well," he murmured, voice smooth, approving. "This is a hell of a show." Michael didn't even look away from me when he smirked. "We're just getting started." And I knew. Nothing would ever be the same again.